Okay, everybody, welcome to the budgeting training. I'm Carol Van Sickle. I work primarily out of our Meta Athens office. And I'm going to start by going over the actual next year proposed budgets. Okay, now's the time of year where everybody's getting ready to start working on those again. If you haven't already started, you're probably going to be starting before too long. Start looking at that information. So I'm going to go over how you can do all of that pretty easily within the USAS system. So on the screen here, you should see the budgeting documentation from the SSDT, from the State Software Development Team. So if you go to their budgeting documentation, this is what you're going to see. There's not a whole lot on this screen. This is pretty much all you'll see on this screen. But you can click on more information about scenarios and then about proposed amounts. Those give you a lot more detail about those options. And then at the bottom in blue here, they have actual steps. Okay, so we highly recommend using these. This first link here is for your proposed amounts for the next fiscal year. And then this second link here is for making budget adjustments in the current fiscal year. So we're going to talk about both of them, but this year, for a change, usually we talk about budget adjustments first, but this year I'm going to switch it up and focus on next year proposed because that's the main thing everybody's focusing on right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the link for the proposed amounts for the next fiscal year. So this is a good guide for you to use, especially if you're new to this, on the steps on how to actually go through this whole process. So you'll see as I scroll down a little bit, it starts with the scenarios area. So that's what we're going to talk about first is scenarios. So I'm going to use a custom USAS demo account that I have over here that I've already logged into. I'm going to go to budgeting, and you can see this is where your options of scenarios and proposed amounts is located. So you'll want to start with the scenarios area first. And when I go into this screen, you can see I already have several things in this grid. Okay, so the first thing you need to think about is building your scenario for your FY26 next year proposed amounts. Now, a lot of districts know or typically use a spreadsheet. So it may be a spreadsheet they've had for a long time that they keep updated, and that's what they want to use to be able to calculate what they want to use for their next year proposed amounts, and then take that information and load it into the system. Other districts like to create other specific worksheets, and there's several different reports you can use to create these worksheets that you can then load into the scenario and then get all that loaded in as your next year proposed amounts. So that's where I'm going to start first. And then after we talk about using these external worksheets or spreadsheets, then I'm going to show you next where you can actually do creating spreadsheets right in the scenario. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it, and there's different advantages and disadvantages to each. Okay, but I'm going to start with using external spreadsheets. So there's probably the most common report I know of that most districts use is if we go to report and report manager, I'm actually just going to filter on report name using percent as wildcard and worksheet for the name of the report. Okay. So this narrows down what I'm seeing in this grid. And the most common one that a lot of districts have been used to using, especially if you were on the old classic software, is the SSDT budget expense worksheet and SSDT revenue expense worksheet. If I click over here to generate the report, you can see that I'm going to actually click default. I think it's already set to default. Okay, no, it's not. Okay, by default, it's going to create a PDF document. You'll probably want to change that if you want to use Excel in order to load it into scenarios. Change it to Excel data. Then you can use the query options, and this is how you can filter if you want to select specific accounts. Then you can go ahead and do your filter here and then generate the report. Now I've already done that, so I'm just going to bring up the report I've already generated. Let me go and find it here. Okay, whoops. If I can get my cursor to work right. There we go. Okay. Now this one I've already filtered it down to only these specific accounts that you see on my screen. And these are all 102 objects, and they're in just the 400, 500 objects, or for the 102 OPU. So this is basically the fields that you'll see when you run this particular expense worksheet report. So these are all the fields that are already in it. Okay, so it has fiscal year to date appropriated, prior year encumbrances. So you can see there's a lot of different amount fields in here. It does have a next year proposed amount field. So keep that in mind, because since that already exists in the report when you generate it, if you want a report that once you establish your next year proposed amounts, you could go ahead and run this report and get those figures that way if you want. Okay, then if I scroll to the right more, you can see it also includes prior year expended, 2 year prior, 3 year prior. And then I actually added this field. Okay, this did not come in automatically when the report was generated. So you need to create a PA dash and then the year for what these figures are for. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be doing our next year proposed amounts for FY26. So this needs to say PA-2026. Now, if you want, if you're generating this report, instead of adding this column, you could just use this column and change the name to the PA-2026 if you want. Okay, and then to the right, okay, you can see how the account codes automatically come in on this report. So you can see there's a lot of information. And this is kind of nice because if you have a lot of data coming in on the spreadsheet and you want to filter it down even more to only, work on budgeting for specific accounts, if you want only like your 500 object levels, you could filter on this field and get any 500s. And then, of course, for each specific budget account, you'll have the specific budget codes, or I'm sorry, object codes. Okay. So there's a lot of data in here, but, you might find that to be to your advantage depending on, how you want to filter to get, just what you want to use for your budgeting. Okay. But for this specific example, like I said, I already put in the PA-2026, and I just plugged in, just to keep it simple, I made these all $1,000. So I'm going to budget $1,000 for each of these codes for FY26. Okay, so that's that report. And then if I go back to my demo account, in the report manager, okay, I still have my filter on here. The other report you might want to use is the budgets worksheet and revenues worksheet. Now, these are custom reports that you would have to add into Report Manager if you don't have them already. And that's really simple to do. If I go back to the SSTT documentation for the budget scenario steps, or steps for creating your next year proposed, again, scenarios is where we're going to start, so we'll get into that here in a little bit. So it talks about the scenarios grid. So there's a lot of good information in here, especially if you're newer to this or you need a refresher. But as I scroll down, you can see there's 2 links here for the budget spreadsheet and revenue spreadsheet. So again, if you don't already have those available in your report manager, you would just click on each one of these. And in my case, it automatically downloaded to my downloads area. So you can see this budgets worksheet.rpd-json. Okay, so that's what you'll see. And then you can just do the same thing for revenue and download it. Once you have those downloaded, you'll go to your USAS account, go into Report Manager, which is where I'm at right now, and then you'll just click on this Import Report option here, and then navigate to locate those files you just downloaded, and then open them up and save them, and then they'll be in the list. Okay, so if you don't already have those, that's how you can add them in. Okay, but again, I actually ran a budgets worksheet and a revenues worksheet. So if I click on the generate option, again, I'm going to go back to the default so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so the default settings for these worksheets is already in Excel data. And then this is the name here. And then the query options, again, you can use the filters if you only want to select specific accounts that go into the worksheet. Okay, so again, I've already done this for both budget and revenue. So let me see if I can pull those up. Okay, so let's see. I have the budget worksheet here. I've got a couple of them here. Okay, I've got the budgets worksheet for transportation here. Okay, so on this one, I just filtered for just my 2.8 function codes. So I'm only getting transportation information. Once my spreadsheet was created, I then did some additional filtering. So again, I only had the accounts that I really want to update. And that's one of the things I recommend when you're using the spreadsheets is only include the accounts that you're actually going to put in a figure for your next year proposed. You can leave ones in there that are zero, but it's just more accounts that are on your spreadsheet, so it just takes it a little longer to process if you have those on there, and then they're really not doing anything. Okay, so I recommend cleaning it up and get rid of anything that you're not actually entering a figure for. Okay, but in my example here, using Excel, I then used a formula. So this is just a really simple example. So this PA column was actually already there. I just had to add the dash 2026. And then I actually did a formula to calculate what I want to use for my next year proposed. So I used the fiscal year to date expendable amount and I multiplied it by 1.02. So I increased them all by additional 2% for the next year. So I did that formula for all of these rows, and then these are the figures that it entered. Okay, so I've got 27 total accounts on this spreadsheet. Okay, and then the revenues worksheet. Okay, that's what this one looks like. And for this one, I just did transportation, so I just did the receipt code for transportation. Again, this PA field was in here. I just had to add the dash 2026. And then just to keep it simple, I entered in $5,000 for each one of these accounts. Okay, so once you have the information in your spreadsheets, what you would want to do is go into budgeting and then go to scenarios. You'll always want to start with scenarios, and then you're going to create. So if I can figure out where my cursor is here, there we go. Okay, and then give it a unique name so you know what it's for. So I'm going to do FY26 NYP for next year proposed. You could add a description if you want, it's not required. And then make sure for the fiscal year, though, you do have the correct year. So in this case, make sure it's 2026. In this case, I'm adding those external spreadsheets that I created. So I am going to do an upload down here at the bottom. This upload at the very bottom is what you will always use if you're loading an external spreadsheet that you've created. And one more thing before I do that I wanted to mention. Whatever spreadsheet you're using, all you have to do is make sure that your account dimensions, so for your expenditures, your account dimensions have to be exactly what you see here. Okay, so make sure they look like this. So it should be fund with capital F, function with just capital FUNC, etc. Okay, so this is required. These have to be these exact names. And then the only other thing that's really required on the spreadsheet that it's going to look at is that PA dash field. Okay. So this is a different one that I brought up before I added the dash 2026 on it and my figures. Okay, but those are the fields that are required to be on the spreadsheet. Okay, so going back to my demo, I'm going to upload those three spreadsheets. Now, every time you load a spreadsheet, you need to give it a unique name. So I'm going to do, let's just do FY26 transportation expenditures, whatever you want to call it. And again, you can add a description if you want. Then you're just going to go ahead and choose the file and then locate the one you want to use. All of mine are in here. Okay, so I'm going to do my budgets worksheet transportation one, which is actually this one here. Okay, and you can see it put the file right here, and then you want to click on Start Upload. And again, depending on how large the file is, this might take a little while, but I'm keeping pretty small, so it came back with this message and said it was uploaded. If I close that, you can now see that it's in there. Okay, so you can see the sheet name. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to click that. You can see the sheet name, what I named it. Let me click the plus here. And then you can see that Excel file that I added. So I'm going to go ahead and upload the other two that I have. And I'm going to do the revenue one. Okay, then I can choose my file. Okay, so I'm going to do my revenues worksheet for transportation. Upload that. And now that one's in there. And then I'm going to do one more. Let me grab that other one that I had. Okay, this was my object 102. I'm sorry, OPU 102. Okay, so actually I'm going to put OPU 102. Okay, so I've got those three loaded in. Now, when you're creating the scenario, you want to make sure you have everything in the one scenario that you want to use for your next year proposed for the next year. Okay, so if you have more spreadsheets that you're going to be loading, you don't want to do anything until everything gets loaded in. Okay, so that's the first thing. Get everything in one scenario, and then you'll be ready to move on to the next steps. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to show you. Okay, so here it is, FY26 NYP. All right. So before I go any further, I wanted to show you and talk to you about creating spreadsheets within a scenario. Now, the advantage to doing that is you can actually clone that scenario from the previous year, regenerate all of your worksheets so they have current data in them, and then update them for the proposed amounts for the next year. And then you can just keep reusing it year after year. Now, it can require quite a bit of setup, but once you have it done, then it's pretty easy from year to year to just keep regenerating it over and over. So I'm just going to show you an example of that. So here I'm going to look at my FY24 cloned NYP just as an example. I'm going to go into the edit option. And when you edit a scenario and you see this button available here, if I hover over that, it says regenerate sheet. That is how I know this is an internal spreadsheet. So it was a spreadsheet created within this scenario. So I'm going to show you cloning of it. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of the edit mode. When I'm just viewing a scenario, it does have a clone option. So I'm going to click on that. So if any of you are familiar with doing these internal spreadsheets and you want to take your scenario from last year and clone it to this year, you can give that a try. You would just follow these same steps. So I'm going to call this one FY26 cloned scenario. Again, make it something unique, but this one would be for 2026. And then you can see that spreadsheet's in there already, and I just want to go ahead and save it. Okay. And then I'm just going to get out. Here's that FY24 one. Okay, but here's the one I just cloned. Okay, so now I can edit this one. Okay, and then I have this regenerate option. So what will happen if I regenerate, okay, is it's going to take me to this area here. So when you're creating these internally, this is what you see. And you're going to see where you can select budgets or you can do your revenue. Well, in this case, it won't give you that option because this one was specifically for budget. The sheet name is transportation. This shows all of the fields that were selected and used. And then there's another tab here for configure filters. So you can see when this was created, we selected the active field that equals true. So we only wanted active account codes. And then we did the function. And then we used the like operation so that we could do a wildcard so that we were selecting only the 8 function codes. And then we also did anything that had a fiscal year to date expendable that was greater than 0. Okay, so you've set up these filters, however you want. You just have to be careful if you're going to use this option and use these from year to year. Make sure this information is still correct for the new year that you're working in. A good example is, like maybe you have those special cost centers you're using for specific years. So maybe you were using 9125 or 24. Yeah, I'm sorry, 9125, and now you've set up accounts for 9126. So if you were using that specific special cost center in here, make sure you update that for the new year to pull in the correct codes. Either that or delete it and then recreate a new one. Okay. When I save the sheet, that's when it regenerates the spreadsheet for me. So you'll get this message come up. And then if you want to go ahead and continue, just go ahead and click create. Okay. And then if I go into the spreadsheet and I do the edit, then this is what it looks like when you're doing it within the scenario. Okay, so it has all those fields that were selected, and you can expand these, of course. And then you'll notice at the end here, this does have PA-2026. So again, you have to make sure it'll automatically have the correct dimension names. And then it will have the PA-2026. Make sure that's in there with the correct year. And then you can go ahead and just start filling in the amounts in these fields. And you can use formulas in here. Okay. Now this isn't as, maybe not quite as easy to use. I mean, this is good for simple calculations. If you need to do a lot more things with the information, then one of the things you could do is you could actually download this spreadsheet that you created. And then when you open that up, you can open it in Excel and then work with it in there. And I don't think it came up for me yet. Let me close some of my other ones. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's the one that I created from the internal query and internal spreadsheet. Okay, now the only thing that's really different with this from the other spreadsheets that we're using for external is it does have this ID field here. That's a unique ID that when you're using the internal spreadsheets, that needs to stay in there. Okay. So if you download it and you want to work with it in Excel, get those figures in there. And again, I would get rid of anything that you're not going to load an amount for, just to, keep it cleaner. And so you have less accounts that it has to work on loading. So save the spreadsheet again with your figures. And then when you go back to the scenario, what you'll want to do is you'll edit the scenario and then you'll click this button here. Okay, so this is where you got it from originally. Go back to that same line and then click this upload and replace option. It tells you this operation will overwrite the existing sheet. Do you want to replace the current sheet? You say OK, and then you just have to choose that file that you saved that has your figures in it and then upload it. Okay, and then it'll have the figures in there from what you had saved. Okay, you just have to be careful. You put it in the same place where you got it. Do not use this option. If you do, then you're actually loading an external spreadsheet. So that's completely different. Okay, so be careful when you're doing that. Okay, any questions about using an external versus an internal? Okay, the other thing I'll show you is, okay, if you're doing internal spreadsheets in here, and I want to add a new one, you would use the create button down here at the bottom. So you'll be in edit mode in the scenario, and then you'll click create. Okay, and remember this is that same screen we saw earlier. Okay, but since I'm creating a new sheet, I have the option to select either budget or revenue. Okay, so when I select budget, I'm going to stick with that one. And then there'll be a standard set of fields that come in. You can change this. So if there's some in here you don't want, so let's say I don't want the encumbrance fields, I'm just going to delete those out. And then let's say I have the current fiscal year to date expended. I have prior year expended, but let's say I want the previous years from that as well. If I scroll down over on the left side here, I can add 2-year prior expended, and you can just either double click or drag and drop it. Apparently I have to drag and drop it. Okay, and you can put it wherever you want. You can actually move these fields around. And I'm going to grab 3-year. Whoops. Got to hold it down and drag it. There we go. And again, you can arrange them however you want in here if you want to. And then give it a unique name. Or before I get to that, let's go to configure filters. And okay, there won't be anything in here when you're creating it new. So if you want to put in filters to just pull in specific accounts, you would just click on accounts on the left, click on code, and then you'll see each of the account dimensions here. And then you can go ahead and select what it is you want to pull in. So just as an example, let's say I only want object code 511. Okay. And then you can add other things as well as you want. Here's that active field. So if you want to make sure you're only getting active accounts, you can do active equals true, and you can just do a lowercase t there. That's all you would need. And then again, give it a unique name. So I'm just going to say object 511. And then when you save the sheet, again, you'll get that box. Click create. Okay, hopefully you'll get a green message then. And then that file will be in there. Okay, and again, since I created it internally in the scenario, I have that regenerate button. Okay, so be careful about using that regenerate button, because once you have figures in the spreadsheet, if you regenerate it again later, it's going to wipe those out. Okay.
Carol,
Yes.
we do have a question in the
Oh,
chat.
yes. Thank you. All right. What is the benefit of the internal spreadsheet? Okay. So the only benefit of using the internal spreadsheet is that you can clone the scenario from year to year. So it takes a lot of work to get these in here, okay, to get this all set up the way you want it. But once you have everything in here, You can clone it the next year when you're getting ready to do budgets for the next year, give it a new name, and then you can regenerate all of these spreadsheets. And then all you have to do is get your figures entered in, and then you're good to go. So some districts like to do that. Some people like that option. For others, it gets confusing and kind of complicated, so they don't like to mess with it. So it's just really your preference. And that's kind of why I started the session talking about using external spreadsheets, because I think a lot of people prefer just using external spreadsheets that they've created. Either they're working with one they've had, or they run those reports and create their own spreadsheets for what they need. And then they just use this upload down here to load all their externals. So it's just whatever you prefer. Okay. But some people do like this option. They like, yeah, I can just regenerate it every year. And it's just, for them, it saves time. Okay. But that doesn't work for everybody. Okay. But whenever you're working in these scenarios, make sure you click save frequently so you don't lose anything that you may have just done, especially if you've been updating these internal spreadsheets with amounts. If you forget to save, it's going to be gone. So you'd have to re-enter it. Okay, so that's an example of using internal. Okay, so we talked about adding external spreadsheets. We've looked at creating internal and doing a clone. And then you'll notice on my grid here, we have a couple down here at the bottom. You may be creating a couple of different scenarios for your next year. So this is an example if you have a levy on the ballot and you're waiting to see if it passes or not. Maybe you go ahead and build those scenarios for if it fails versus if it passes. Okay. But then, so let's say it does pass. You'd want to go ahead and delete out the scenario for the fails one. And then you're going to actually activate or promote. It's actually called promote your passes scenario. Okay. But whatever scenario you create, again, make sure all of your spreadsheets are in that one scenario. Okay, that you don't want to do multiple scenarios. You could, but I'll explain why we recommend having everything together. Okay. So does anybody have any questions about scenarios in general at all? Okay. Does anybody want me to review creating the internal ones again or going over adding the external? Any questions at all? Okay, y'all are making this really easy. Okay. All right. So the next step. Okay, so once you have the scenario built that you're going to use, okay, so let's say that one that I have for those external spreadsheets, this one here, FY26 NYP. Okay, I just want to view it again. So you want to look at your spreadsheets. And actually, I'm going to show you, I'm going to edit this. Okay, when I edit this scenario, you'll notice that regenerate button is not available. Okay, that tells me this was an external spreadsheet that was added into the scenario. So all of these are my external spreadsheets that I uploaded to this scenario. And let's say I have everything in that I want for my next year proposed amounts. Okay, once you have this ready, okay, then your next step is going to be to promote it. So on the grid, next to the one you want, and you can filter on it to make sure you've got the correct one so you don't accidentally, click on the wrong thing. You click this up arrow is to promote the scenario. Now, before I click it, let me explain what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to go to budgeting and I'm going to go to the proposed amounts area. Okay, so the proposed amounts area, when you promote a scenario, it pushes all of that information in the scenario into here. And you'll notice there's a tab for budgets, and then there's another tab for revenue. Okay, and you'll notice I already have data in here. Okay, I'm on the revenues tab. You'll notice there's this drop-down box right here. If I click in that, you'll notice that it only shows fiscal year 22. So everything that's in here is for fiscal year 22. If I go back to the Budgets tab, you'll see that same box. If I click on this, you'll notice I have several years in here. Okay, so a lot of you might find that you have multiple years listed here. Now, what you might want to do is go ahead and work on cleaning those out. I mean, you don't have to continue with creating your next year proposed for 2026. But at some point, you might want to clean it up and get rid of these. There's not really any reason for these to be in here anymore. So let's say I go to fiscal year 22. As soon as I actually select that year, it's going to filter this grid for only those accounts and amounts. If I scroll to the right here, you can see there's amounts here. So these are all the ones specifically from 2022. Okay, so if I want to get rid of these, all you have to do is click this box here to select them all. And then you'll notice there's a delete option available. So then you can just click delete. Now, depending on how many accounts there are in here, you might have to do it several times to get rid of all of them. Okay. I'm not going to do that now, but that's just something to keep in mind. You might want to clean them up. But what you're going to see happen here in a minute is when I promote my FY26 scenario, you're going to see that we're then going to have an option in here for fiscal year 26, and it will contain all of the account codes and amounts that I have in those spreadsheets in my scenario. And I do have revenue as well, so we'll see 2026 in the revenue area as well. But this is where they come, and as soon as they come into this area, so as soon as 2026 accounts and amounts are in here, for them just sitting in here, that is what will populate the actual next year proposed field on the accounts. So let me show you that as well. So let me go to Core, Accounts. I'm going to go to Expenditure. And let me see. Let me see one of my spreadsheets and grab one of my accounts. Let me do my budget, next year proposed. Okay. So let's look at this first one here. Okay, so this is one of my transportation expenditure accounts. So 001, 2824, 439. All the other dimensions are zeros. My next year proposed amount is going to be 322.63. Okay. So if I look at that account in here, in the accounts area, okay, there it is. And if I go ahead and view it, and I'm just going to click the plus sign so you can see more of the screen. If I scroll down, you'll see there's this next year proposed field here that is currently 0. As soon as there is a 2026 amount in the proposed amounts area for budgeting, it's going to populate that amount in here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to budgeting, back to my scenario. I'm going to make sure I select the one I want to promote. Okay, so that's the one I want to send over. So I'm going to click this, and then you're going to get this message. And it's just telling you it's going to replace all existing proposed amounts, both expenditure and revenue, for fiscal years related to this scenario. Okay, even if you are not promoting for that account type, are you sure you want to promote? So basically what it's saying is, okay, all of these figures are for 2026. So in my proposed amounts area, if I already have some 2026 amounts loaded in there, when I promote this, it's going to overwrite those. Okay, so that's the main reason we recommend having all of your spreadsheets for the year in one scenario. Because if you have separate ones for FY26 and you promote each one, it's going to overwrite in the next year proposed area. Okay, that may or may not matter to you depending on how much you use those next year proposed amounts before, while you're in this current fiscal year. Okay, some of you it might not matter, so you don't care. You just want to go ahead and promote it. Okay, and as I explain how this works, once we get into the proposed amounts area, hopefully it'll make more sense. Okay, because it can get pretty confusing. Okay, but I do want to promote. because I do want these to be my next year proposed amounts. Okay, so again, depending on how much information you have, this may take a while before you get to this message, but once it completes, you should see that. And then now you want to go into that proposed amounts area. Okay, so now if I click on this box for the year, you can see now it shows 2026. So I'm going to select that. Okay, and then now my grid is only going to have the accounts and amounts that I loaded in for 2026. Okay, and if I scroll over here, you can see the amount over there. And I can actually, move my grids around a little bit, or my fields. So you can see that. Now, the nice thing about this is once it's in here, you can generate a report. So if you want to double check everything, you can click report. It'll only generate for what is in the grid. So you can do PDF, you could do another Excel spreadsheet if you want, and go ahead and generate it, and you can just double check everything that way if you want. Okay, same thing for the revenue section. I did include revenue, so I do have 2026 in here for revenue. Okay, so now if you're ready to, so everything looks good. These are in the proposed area, so having them just in this grid is what populates that next year proposed field. So now if I go back to accounts and I look at that one transportation account that we looked at earlier, we're going to see that next year proposed amount on it. Okay, so that was my 001, 2824, 439. There it is right there. So if I view it and I go down here, let me make it bigger. Okay, you can see my next year proposed is right here. Okay, now if I were to delete this account out of that proposed amounts area, this would then go to 0 because it's no longer in that grid. Okay, so now the next step. So let me go back to proposed amounts. Okay. All right, so even though these amounts show up in next year proposed, we have not applied these to be the initial figures for FY26 yet. Okay, so that's the final step in doing your budgeting. So once you have all of your FY26 figures in here, you're going to make sure you select the year, and then we're going to apply. Okay, until you do that, it's not going to be set for your initial figure for FY26. Okay, so that's the key. That's the final step. Keep in mind when you do this as well that you do not have to do this twice. You do not have to do it for budgets and then go into revenue and do it. As soon as you select 2026 and click apply, it will apply for both. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and click apply. Okay, now we're going to get a different screen. Okay, so now you have to tell it what transaction type you're doing. So my options are that I'm doing temporary, permanent, or I'm doing an adjustment. And adjustments we'll talk about later. So since we're doing next year proposed, you have to tell it whether these are considered temporary or permanent figures. Doing it at this time, it's usually always temporary. It's going to have the update GAAP original estimate amounts box already marked. And the effective date will automatically be set to July 1 of 25. And then it's going to mark it for full year. Okay. And both of these you can turn on or off if you don't want those to update. But in general, most people usually just leave those on. Okay. Now these don't, this field here will update that GAAP original estimate on the actual accounts. Full year is just a flag. It's just basically telling the system, I'm estimating these amounts to be the amounts for the full year. It doesn't really do anything special, so it's just something, if you don't really care about it, it probably doesn't matter if it's marked or not. Okay, but I'm going to leave it marked, and then I'm going to click apply. Now, this process will take quite a while for it to run, so you might have to wait on it for quite a while. Again, depending on how many spreadsheets you have, because now what it's doing is it's actually updating the initial amounts for FY26. Okay, so we need to wait for it to complete. There we go. Okay. Okay, so it's done. So what we recommend is keep all of your worksheets for your next year proposed in one scenario. When you're ready, go ahead and promote that scenario. It will push all of that information into this proposed amounts area. As soon as they're in this area, next year proposed fields are updated. So if you want to look at information on accounts, if you want to run reports that show next year proposed amounts, you can do that and they'll be there. And then when you're sure you're ready to actually apply it, so it will become the initial figure for the new year, make sure you select the year and then click apply. You only have to do that once for both budget and revenue. It does both at the same time. Okay, so now the question is, well, how do I see that my figures for the initial amount for next year are there? Okay, well, there's two ways you can do that. There is a report that you can run, and this is a custom report. So if you don't see it in here, I'll show you where you can get it. Let me see if I can remember what it's called now. I think it's called Initial is in the name of it, I believe. Okay, yeah, here we go. Okay, so in Report Manager, for report name, I did percent initial percent. If you do that and you don't see budget transactions initial estimates or revenue transaction initial estimates, you can get these from the SSDT Public Shared Reports Library. If you're not familiar with where that's at, the easiest way to get to it is to use your help option in your USAS account. And then you'll see an option right there for Public USAS Reports Library. When you click that, you'll see this link on the screen. When you click it, it should open up in a new tab in your browser. Okay, so here's my USAS account here. It opened this new tab over here. And then if you can either scroll down to, well, actually, if I scroll down just a little bit, I'll see a link here for budgeting report. So I'm just going to click on that. Yeah, sure I am. Well, it should take me to it. I don't know why it's slow. Yeah, my link's not working for some reason. I don't know why. Normally it would take you to that section. So I'm just going to scroll down. Okay, so here's the budgeting report section here. And if I scroll down just a little bit more, toward the bottom here, excuse me, toward the bottom is those budget transactions initial estimates, revenue transactions initial estimates. So again, all you have to do is click on the actual file name, and mine automatically downloaded, so just do that for both to download them. Okay, and then I'm going to close this window here, and then I'm back on my USAS session, so I'm going to go to Report Manager. Then all you have to do is click Import Report, locate each one of those, so you have to do it twice for each one, and go ahead and save it, and then they'll be in your list. Okay, but if I go ahead and run it, so let me grab, okay, so I'm going to grab the budget one here. I'm going to go ahead and generate it. Okay, it creates it in PDF format by default. Again, you can change that if you want. You can give it a unique name if you want. I'm just going to go ahead and generate it as is. Okay, and I forgot to show you here. Let me go ahead and open it, but let me go back here and show you when I was in Generate here. There's a query options area here, and I forgot to change it. So yeah, usually when you run reports, we usually recommend what you do is go ahead and click under Save and Recall up at the top. Click Default to get rid of any options on how you may have run it before. That way you have a clean slate. And actually, I believe this runs for the current period. I think that's what that means. I'm going to use, you can either use the FY26 fiscal year range, or if you just use 7/1 to 7/1, I believe it'll work as well. Let me do it that way. Either way should work. So let me generate that again. Okay, so this is what the report looks like in PDF format. So you can see here, so here's those 102 OPUs that I loaded in on one of my spreadsheets. So you can see for the new fiscal year, it created temporary initial. So this tells me the initial amount has been created. And you're going to see two lines for each account because it's including the gap initial amount as well. Okay, and if I go down further, you can see my transportation, my 2.8 functions are in here. Here's that one we looked at earlier for next year proposed. You can see my 322.63. Okay, so that's probably the easiest way to verify that those amounts are loaded in as your actual initial figure. So you can do that for revenue as well. The other way you can check, I'll show you that in my demo account here. Okay, is if you have under core posting periods, you notice I already have July created for fiscal year 26. Okay, so you can, if you have July created, it doesn't have to be open. So if you go ahead and create July ahead of time, but you don't want it open because you want to make sure nobody enters, any transactions for the new fiscal year yet, you can go ahead and close it. But what you'll want to do though is you could make it current. Okay, it doesn't hurt anything to make it current. Okay, and then you just can go ahead and run some reports that will include the initial figure and you can verify it that way. Or if you just want to check a couple or just use the grid to see those amounts, you can do that as well. Because remember, from the grid, you can generate reports as well. But let's look at that one transportation account we looked at before. Okay, so you can see I'm in July of 2025. And if I view this, there's that 322.63 as my initial budget figure. Okay, so it'll just automatically be there when you actually make July current. That's when they'll show up. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I do see one in chat here. We apply once we have the current year budget completed. Correct. You want to make sure you have everything ready before you do the apply, and actually even before you promote from the scenario. Again, keep everything in one scenario. If we apply before, does it override the current budget? If we apply before, um, okay, so I'm guessing you're asking if you go ahead and, oh, before July 1, does it override the current budget? No, well, okay, so if you're talking about, okay, so these are your budgets for FY26. So as long as in those spreadsheets in the scenario you have that PA-2026, it knows it belongs to FY26. So it will apply it to your initial figures for FY26. Okay. And a lot of districts do this before they close the current fiscal year. Now, you don't have to. So that's the other thing. Okay. And I see a message that says, it says, I cannot create a July without the month before. Yes, that's correct. So if I go to core posting periods, okay, if right now, if you have February, only February or March open, and you haven't created your other months after that, all of those months have to be created before you can go ahead and create July. Okay, so you'd have to add all of those other months as well. Okay, so getting back to what we're showing you now. So, um, go ahead and start getting your budget information together, put it in one scenario, make sure you use PA-2026. If you want to apply it before you close this fiscal year, this is what I'm showing you now. You can do that, and that this is, how it all looks. I don't know where this came from. Let me get rid of that. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, now some districts don't want to apply their budgets until they're actually in the new fiscal year. And that's fine. You can go ahead and create these scenarios now. They'll be ready to go. Once you're in the new fiscal year, then you would just do the same process. Okay, so you would just go to budgeting, go to your scenario, find that scenario that has all of your figures that you want to apply, promote it, go into proposed amounts, select fiscal year 26, and then go ahead and apply it. Okay, but in this case, because you're already in the new fiscal year, there is no next year proposed amount, right? Because you're in that year. So it's just going to automatically apply these figures to the initial amounts. Okay, let me catch up on questions here in chat. If we use an outside spreadsheet and load, do we need to create the column that says PA 2026 in order for it to work? Yes. Yes. So let me pull up one of my external spreadsheets again. I think I still have one open. Okay, here's my transportation one that I was using. Okay, so again, whenever you create an external spreadsheet, make sure that your account code dimensions look exactly like what you see here on my screen. And make sure you have a column that has PA-2026. These dimension names and that PA2-2026 are what are required for the budgeting process to work. Okay, let's see. If you apply and your next year proposed and the update gap initial box is check marked, will that overwrite the 25? No, no, because remember, you're putting in that PA-2026. So as long as you have the correct year, it's only going to affect fiscal year 26. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody want me to review anything again? Okay, here's another question. Is there any reason you should include zeros for the accounts you don't typically budget when you do your proposed amounts? Yeah. So, so if you have any accounts where you're not going to actually have a figure put in for your initial budget, I would exclude those in the spreadsheet. So let's say you have this master spreadsheet that you like to use, but you're only budgeting for certain accounts. I would filter that spreadsheet and maybe copy all that information to a new spreadsheet and just use that to load into your scenario. That way, you're only loading the ones that actually have figures for next year proposed. You don't have to do that, but it just makes the process go a little faster as far as getting everything loaded in through these steps. Okay, because the more accounts it has to look at, the longer the processing time. Okay, next question. Having great questions. Thank you all for asking. Let's see. Okay, what do you do if you have all your budgets in and you apply in April, but then in June you have all the grant budgets and want to apply those? Okay, so that's a good question. And hopefully I don't make this more confusing. Um, so you can do one of two things. Okay, so let me go to budgeting scenarios. Okay, so I've already applied my FY26 next year proposed. And let me actually go back to the posting period I was in. I was in June. So I'm just going to make that current again. Okay, so I'm back to June. Okay, so in my scenarios, I've already applied my FY26 next year proposed. Okay, so in your example, you have some grants that you need to budget for. Those weren't included in here. You can do one of two things. Okay, if you don't care about that next year proposed amount and being able to see that, like I said, some districts don't care. Some, they want to run reports and show those. So they want to see next year proposed. But since it's already been applied, you can actually go to proposed amounts. I mean, you don't have to do this. I mean, you'll see these are the ones I loaded, right? Okay. But again, if you don't care that they show up in next year proposed, you know they've been applied to the new fiscal year. One of the things you could do is go to scenarios. You could go ahead and create a different FY26 next year proposed for just your grants. Load those spreadsheets into the scenario, promote it. When you promote it, since it's for 2026, it's going to automatically override. So it's going to delete out automatically anything that was in here for 2026. So again, if you don't care about next year proposed amount, you know these were already applied, you can do that. Okay, and it won't hurt anything. But if you're somebody that's like, no, I want to see all my next year proposed amounts while I'm still in this current FY25 fiscal year, then you don't want these to go away, right? So the only way to prevent that from happening would be to go to scenarios, go to the one you were already using and edit it, and then just add your grants spreadsheet into here, save it, and then just redo the process. Go ahead and promote this again. When you do, it's going to update this area, but it's going to put everything back in. Plus, it'll have your grant accounts in here then. And then just select 2026 and go ahead and reapply it. Okay, it won't hurt a thing. It's just going to put those same amounts in for the initial figure that you already applied. And then it'll include the grant ones as well. So it's just your preference. Okay. And like I said, it's just that next year proposed amount. That's the only thing that gets affected by what's in this grid. Okay, let's see what else we got. Great questions, everybody. All right. So I think I answered that one. How do you create the new year for proposed? Okay, I'm not sure what you mean about how do you create the new year for proposed. I don't know if you can elaborate on that, April. If you have a speaker or if you're on the phone, feel free to unmute and ask. Okay, where it says fiscal year 2026. Oh, okay. So where I'm at here. Okay, that automatically came in from the scenario. Okay, so I don't know if you saw earlier, if you were on earlier when I first went into this area, 2026 wasn't there. Okay, it got in there as soon as I promoted my scenario for 2026. So that's where that came from. Okay. Another question. Once the next year proposed amounts are all entered, what report can we run to see them? Okay, so there's a couple reports. So if you want to see those next year proposed figures, all right. So again, they're right in they're right in this area. So they're already here in proposed amounts. So if you just want to use these will be your next year proposed, right? So you can run a report and verify all those. But if you want to actually see that specific field, that next year proposed field for the accounts, one of the reports you can run is going to be one I showed you earlier. So if I do report name, if I filter for worksheet, the SSDT budget expense worksheet and revenue expense worksheet, these will actually show you those next year proposed fields. Let me see if I can find the one I generated earlier. Let's see. I guess I didn't have that open. Whoops, where'd it go? Okay, sorry, it disappeared on me here. Okay, let's see. Okay, it's over on my other screen. I'm gonna have to drag it over because it's kind of hiding on me. Okay, so I have everything in here. Let's see. So the budget expense worksheet here. So here's the one I originally created before I filtered for just object or OPU 102. Let me see if this will open for me. Okay, here we go. So this is the budget expense worksheet that I originally created that I was working with. And if I scroll over, you can see here, it already has that next year proposed in there. Okay, so if I were to rerun this now, I would see some figures in here because I have those FY26 accounts and amounts in that next year or in that proposed amounts area in budgeting. Okay, so that's one of the reports you can run that I know of that already has that field in there. The other thing you can do, I don't know if there's any other reports that already have that field in there. I know that one definitely does. So that's the SSTT, excuse me, budget worksheet. The other way you can look at those is you can go to core accounts. And again, I'm just going to use expenditures as my example. Okay, and just an FYI on this grid, be careful about how many amount fields you have in your grid. Try to limit it to only just a few. The more you add in here, uh, sometimes it hoses up the grid and it could actually end up locking you up. We've had that happen to several people every now and then, so be cautious of that. I may have already added this when I was playing around before. Let me go to the right here. Yes. So I already added next to your proposed. You can actually grab it and add it to your grid. So to do that, you would just click on more. And then as you scroll down, okay, you'll see this amounts area. Okay. That's if you're not used to the more area in here, it can be kind of hard to follow. Okay, because there are different amounts sections here. Um, so I don't know. I wonder if I did grab the right one. I think I did. Okay, so it looks like I'm under the budget section here. Yes. So, and amounts, I opened up under budgets and I included fiscal year to date expended, fiscal year to date expendable. But as I go down further, there's next year proposed. Okay, so you can add that to your grid if you want. Just remember if you add or remove anything from more and then you close the box, it's going to refresh and then it's going to take you back to this fund tab. So make sure you click back into expenditure and then you'll see the updated grid. And then, so what you can do in here is, so now I should have figures in here, right? Because I have data for 26 in my proposed amounts area in budgeting. So if I do greater than 0 here, let's see if it'll filter for me. So I should be able to see all my next year proposed amounts just in this grid here. Yeah, it's being slow. So this is just another way you can get it, because remember, you can create reports from the grid. Oh, mine's not working very well. It's being really slow. I really don't know why. I wouldn't have expected it to be this slow. But anyway, it should show any of my accounts. There we go. So it's showing my accounts that have a next year proposed amount. And again, if you want a report of this, just go ahead and click on report and you can generate whatever format you want. Give it a unique name if you want, and then just generate. Okay. All right. What did I miss? Okay. I think I have all the questions answered so far. Okay. Anything else and anything you guys want me to cover again? I hope that made sense. It can be really confusing, but like I said, pick what you're most comfortable with when you're doing your budgeting. And remember, we do recommend keeping everything in one scenario. But again, if next year proposed doesn't matter to you, as long as you're sure you've applied everything from one scenario, if you have a different scenario you want to promote and then apply, that's fine. Okay. Again, it's an individual decision by district. You know, everybody's different. And then the same thing with the preferences. You may only want to use external spreadsheets and load them in. But there are some people that like using the internal spreadsheets that you can create and then just being able to clone it from year to year and refresh it.
I have a question, Carol. It's too long probably to put in the chat.
Okay, sure.
I just want to make sure that I understand because this is something I struggle with every year.
Sure.
I have applied my budgets. I'm happy. I'm still in fiscal 25. So I've got all my grants in. I'm happy. It's June, let's just say, and they've been applied. So now that I've applied them in the previous fiscal year, is there anything that you have to do when you get to fiscal 26 for those to populate? It's just when I close, they get pulled in, voila, I'm done.
Right. They're automatically there if you've done the apply. Okay. And the best way to double check it is to run that report. So let me show you that again. And this is a report you have to get. If you don't already have it in Report Manager, you can get it from the Public Reports Library. And that is, so if you go to Report Manager and you look for initial in the name, it's budget transactions initial estimates, and then for revenue, it's the revenue one. Okay, but if you have that report, you can generate it, and that will help you verify that those really were applied for FY26. Just remember when you generate the report, make sure you go to the query option and make sure you either do, I would recommend just go ahead and use the full fiscal year. So the fiscal year for 26, just go ahead and put in that range and then generate it, and then it will show you everything you have applied. It is going to be a big report. I think somebody might be asking about that now in chat. But anyway, you can do it in Excel as well if you'd rather do Excel, and then you can filter it out. But it will show you all of the initial figures that were applied. So that's a good way to confirm that everything is there and ready. So as soon as you are in FY26, so as soon as you flip over to July, they'll all be there. Okay.
I didn't realize that report was there. That's a good option. I
Yes.
guess what I've done
Okay.
before is when I've closed and I'm into July of 25, which is fiscal 26, I just go to core accounts, appropriations or whatever estimated. And in my grid, I can see that there's numbers there. I don't
Okay.
have a report because I've already ran a report before I closed the year to match up to my external spreadsheets.
Oh,
So if
okay.
I see numbers there, I'm good.
Good. Great.
So
Okay. Thanks for the question.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, I see another one in chat. It says one of my grants is over 500 lines. Yikes. And usually times out before it completely loads. Should I break down this particular report into smaller ones in one scenario? Yeah, so Kathy, when you're loading that spreadsheet, so the spreadsheet has over 500 lines just for grants. Okay, so again, I'm assuming, so you're actually budgeting for every single account that's in there. If
It's,
not, again,
I
you know,
take out all the 0 lines
okay,
before I
good.
ever start uploading, but it's still over 500 lines because it's our
Wow.
largest grant.
Holy cow. Okay.
It's our Title I grant, so it's got a lot of lines.
Okay.
Because we have over 32 buildings, so I have
Okay.
lines for every building.
Okay.
But it times out and it doesn't get through the whole upload.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so if
So
you're
should I be breaking
having,
it down?
yes, if you're having that issue, yeah, I wonder why. Have you reported that issue to us before?
No,
Because if not, yeah, so go ahead and send us an email to Redesign Help and let us know
Okay.
about that, because we'll check with the SSDT on that, on why that's a problem. 500 line. I don't remember there being like a maximum that it will load, but maybe you're hitting that. I don't know. So we can check with them
Okay.
on that.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
But yeah, in the meantime, yeah, you'll probably want to break it down. So maybe do half of them in one spreadsheet and do half in another. So
I
just,
went so far as to break it down to the individual buildings. Like
oh,
I would put
really?
like I would put 5 buildings on and upload it, make sure all my numbers were good. Then I'd take the next 5 buildings, load those.
Oh, okay.
Just because, I mean, I would literally start it and I could walk away and do other things and I'd come back and it'd still be spinning,
Right. Wow.
spinning. And
Oh
then
my.
I'd come back later and it would have kicked me completely out of the system. So,
Wow.
I didn't know.
Okay. Yeah, definitely send us a email about that so we can check into that with the SSDT.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a challenge whenever, well, larger districts and then districts that just have a lot of accounts. Yeah, it's a challenge to, get through these steps sometimes, because sometimes you do run into some kind of limitations that we might not know about. So, but yeah, breaking it down like that's a good way to get around it for now. But yeah, definitely send us that info so we can ask the SSDT about that, because maybe, they can start working on making some improvements to that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I see another question. What if our grant coordinator doesn't have the budget set by the time we load our next year proposed for all others? Do we just go back in the scenario we used, like you showed us previously, load the grant sheet in addition to all others that were previously completed? Can we also use this if when we have carryover dollars that change our grant budgets? Okay, well, for the first part of the question, again, that depends on how important those next year proposed amounts are for you to be able to see those for the current year. Like I said, some districts it's not a big deal. So if it's not, you could just add those grants into a new scenario for FY26 and then promote those and then apply them. So what's in the proposed amounts area for you wouldn't really make any difference. So you could do a separate one. However, if your district really wants to see all those next year proposed figures, then you would want to retain that. And the only way to do that is add those grant work accounts into your existing scenario that you already used, and then just redo that whole scenario. Okay. Now, the last part of your question, I'm not sure I'm clear on what you're asking. Can we also use this if when we have carryover dollars that change our grant budgets? So if you have, oh, okay, so wait a minute. So you have money you're carrying over for that particular grant that you can still use for the new year. Um, yeah, so if you're carrying over an amount, you're going to just want to include that in your initial budget, correct? Let me see here. Oh, and I just see a post that said we load way more than 500 lines and it doesn't time out. So that's interesting. I don't know why that is. Okay. So again, yeah, if you're having that issue, let us know because it might just be a matter of maybe we need to have them look at how much memory is allocated to your application. So maybe additional memory is needed. It's worth checking into. Okay. Oh, okay. And I see a follow-up. Okay. We don't usually know our exact carryover until after I would do next year proposed in the spring. Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, and that's a good point too, because remember when you're creating your worksheets, uh, if you're waiting more toward the end of the fiscal year, if you're looking at like your current expenditures for the current fiscal year, and for the grants, you're not going to know till closer to the end of June what you have left that you can carry over. Um, so, so yeah. So again, be careful of, what you're putting in for your budgets. If you're looking at, especially if you're referencing the fiscal year to date expenditure account or expenditure amounts. Remember, if you're running those now, you're only seeing expenditures amounts as of, this date. So, you might have to wait. That's a perfect example. You might have to wait to do some of your budgeting closer to June. Okay. So again, there's two different ways you can do it. Um, Either create a new scenario for just those grants, but that will overwrite the previous next year proposed. But again, if it's been applied, it's already set for the initial figure for the next year. So again, it's just, do you want to see next year proposed amounts for the current year? If you do, make sure you load that into the previous scenario you applied. Just reapply it all. It won't hurt a thing. Okay, and then let me see. Okay, let me go back up because I think I missed something. If we use an outside spreadsheet and load, do we need to create the column? Oh, okay. I think I answered that before, didn't I? So, yes, I'll just repeat that. If you're creating your own spreadsheet or using your own existing spreadsheet, and you're going to use that to load your next year proposed figures for 26. Remember, that's one of the required columns. It has to say PA-2026, and then that will have your actual amounts in it that you're going to load as your initial figures for FY26. Okay. All right, I think I caught up on the chat questions. If I missed anything, somebody please let me know. And thank you all for the questions. I mean, those are all great questions. Okay. So I think I've pretty much covered everything for how the budgeting process works. So the last thing I want to cover is if you want to do adjustments. So if you have any budget adjustments you have for this year, you can use this budgeting area to help you with that. So let me just start by showing you. Okay. This is the last thing I wanted to show. So first thing I wanted to show you is just manually entering an adjustment. So if you only have a couple of accounts you're going to adjust, you can just go right into your accounts grid and just do it from there. So I'm going into the expenditure tab. And I thought I wrote down, yeah, there we go. All right, let me do my specific example here. Okay, so I'm going to adjust two accounts. I'm just going to shift some money from one account to another through a budget adjustment. So let me select my first account here. And there we go. Yep, that's the one I wanted. Okay, so this account here, I'm going to view it. Okay, and you can see this had a carryover encumbrance amount and the expendable is $14.58. But let's say I want to add, I'm going to shift $400 from a different account to this one. So I'm going to increase this and do a budget adjustment for an additional $400. Okay, so all you have to do is you just have to view the account, and then you'll see this budgeting adjustments button up at the top. So you just click on that, and then you're just going to click create. Okay, now the date needs to be in the current posting period. So I'm in June. So I'm going to make, well, actually, before I do that, I forget, it does change that date. Because you'll notice the transaction type, it automatically came in with initial. And I don't know if it just does that because of my access level or not, but neither here nor there. I think that's why it put in July 124, because this is initial. But you want to make sure you change this to be adjustment. Okay, now you'll see it changed it to the current date. Okay, but I'm in June of 2025 in my demo account, so I just want to make sure that's a June date. Okay, and then you put in the amount that you're increasing or decreasing by. So I'm just going to plug in 400. You can put a description in if you want, and then just post it. Okay, so then it shows that adjustment is added. And now if I go back here, you can see it added that adjustment for $400. So now my expendable is $18.58. Okay, so let me go to the other account that I'm taking the 400 from. And that's going to be a 551 object. Okay, there it is, 551. So again, I'm going to view it. So this one, the expendable is $4,004.98. So I'm going to take 400 away from here. So again, I'm just going to do budgeting adjustment. I'm going to create. I'm going to select adjustment. Make sure it's in the current period for the date. Okay, in this case, I'm subtracting out 400, so I need to do a negative 400. And then post it. Okay, there it is in the grid there. And then now if I look, I see that negative 400 adjustment. So now the expendable is 3,604.98. Okay, so that's all you have to do if you just have a few. But if you have a lot of adjustments that you're doing, then you're going to want to, then you can use that budgeting area and do adjustments. So if I go to budgeting scenario, so same process we did for next year proposed, you'll just create a scenario for adjustments. So you can see we have some that we had done in the past. So let me look at this one. I'm going to actually edit the FY24 one. Okay, yeah. And you can see I have the regenerate option, so I'm just going to do a clone just to save some time. So I'm going to cancel, so I'm not in edit mode anymore. And then I can click clone. I can create an FY24 25 adjustment. And again, make sure you have the correct year. So these are adjustments for the current fiscal year. So I want to make sure that says 2025. Okay. There's that spreadsheet it came in. I'm just going to click save to make sure I have the scenario saved. Then I'm just going to turn around and edit. Okay. So now I can either edit this spreadsheet that's in here, and this is what it would look like. You want to make sure the PA column is 2025, right? So again, and again, you can use external spreadsheets for your adjustments. Again, just make sure you have the correct account code dimension headings, and you have that column that says PA-2025 in this case for adjustments for this year. Okay. Now, the key to this, though, is you want to make sure you enter in what you want the expendable to be. Okay, so doing it through here is a little different. You know, when you're actually doing it manually on the account, you're adjusting the way you want it to go. So my example was I increased one 400, decreased another 400. In this case, you want to put what you actually want the expendable to be. Let me see. I think this column is my expendables. Okay. Oh, and I have to refresh this actually, because this is not going to be my current figures. Because remember, I cloned this from last year. Okay, so actually, what I want to do is I actually do want to regenerate it. Okay, I'm going to double check my configure filters. Okay, so it's this object, function starts with 1100. That's fine. When I click save, it's going to actually regenerate and update any figures it finds. So now we'll see what, you know, the current fiscal year to date expendable or fiscal year to date expenditures are. So now I can edit. Okay, and actually, it's the same. Okay, so my expendables, I'm only seeing two amounts. So let's just, I think I can do this, maybe. No, I think it's individual. Yeah, okay. Well, that's all right. I'll just leave it just to save time. Okay, so let me just work on these two. So if I do 001, 1132, 411, 300 OPU. Okay, so the expendable currently is 5,000 on that one. And then the next one, which is OPU 700, is 4,500. So let's just work on just those two as an example. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to the right. I'm going to make sure my PA column says 2025. Okay, and I want to put in the amount I want my expendable to be. So let's say I'm going to shift 500 between these two. So I want this one to be the 4,500, and I want to increase this one to be the 5,000. Okay, just as an example. Okay, so I'm going to do accept. I'm going to do save. Okay, so once you have that information in there, okay, then you're going to go to your FY25 adjustment and promote it. Okay, you're going to get that same message here that you usually get. When I click promote, okay, that pushes it over to the proposed amounts area. So I'm going to go over there. And remember, these are adjustments for 2025. So I want to make sure I select 2025. Okay, and here's those accounts. Okay, and if I go to the right, you can see I have that 4,500 and then that 5,000. Something else I forgot to mention earlier in this area, as soon as you push those or you promote the scenario and everything is in the proposed amounts, you can also do updates within the proposed amounts if you want. Okay, so if I want to delete some of these, you know, I don't want these to actually be applied because it's not doing anything anyway, it's just staying 0. Okay, you can delete. Let's say on this one, I want to edit it, and I actually do want to put an amount in this one. So let me put in $500 and save it. Okay, I can also create. So let's say I wanted to add another account in here. I can select something from the list, make sure you put in the correct year, and then put the amount. Okay, I'm not going to actually do that, but you could if you wanted. Okay, but once everything in here looks correct, so if you are going to be editing this area, Definitely create a report if you have a bunch of stuff so you can verify everything. And then again, make sure you select the correct year and then click apply. Oops, and I hit the wrong thing. Look what I did. I went too fast. Okay. Yeah, you don't want this because now I just messed that up. Okay. That's what you don't want to do. Okay, so let me do this the correct way. Luckily, this is just a demo. Okay, make sure you select adjustment. Okay, so since I accidentally hit permanent, those amounts actually became my initial figure. So, yeah, if that happens to you, you definitely need to get that corrected. So you might need to contact us. Okay, so again, remember what you're doing. FY25, I'm doing adjustments, put in the effective date. So again, it has to be in an open posting period. And now I want to apply it. Okay. Now if I go to those accounts, and then I go to the expenditure, and I'm just going to check those two that were in my spreadsheet. Oops, 1132. Oops. 411. There we go. There. Okay, so it's these two right here, the 300 OPU and then the 700. If you remember, this one was 5,000, this one was 4,500, so now it shifted. And actually, you can see that other one where I added 500 to the expendable, so that shows right in there. And if I actually click on this first one, well, it doesn't, well, it shows a big adjustment, so there was something else there were other adjustments in here. Okay, because if there weren't any other adjustments, it would have just shown that $500 shift. Okay, but there was something else in there already. Okay, so I hope that helped. Let me see. I do see something in chat. Oh, yes. Okay, so somebody on the team just sent me a reminder. Thank you. So going back to that proposed amounts area, and just for 2025. Okay, so when I was updating in here, remember that this doesn't affect what you had in the scenarios, because remember this information came in from when you promoted the scenario. So then if you come in here and start changing things, that does not affect the spreadsheets that are in your scenario. Okay. And if I were to make some changes but don't apply it, and then I go back to my scenario and promote it again, it would wipe out anything that I may have changed in here before. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I don't see anything. Okay, I think that covers everything. Does anybody else have any questions? Does anybody have any tips for when you've done the budgeting before? Team, am I forgetting anything? I'm sure I am, but it's a lot of information. Okay, I did see something come in. Okay, we do a lot of adjustments and sometimes are moving funds from one account to multiple or vice versa. It's very time consuming doing it as budget adjustment under the account screen. Doing this way, I would have to be accurate in my amounts for expendable, yes. Is there any way to have the ability to do adjustments like we used to have in the old system? Well, you'll have to refresh my memory on that. I don't know if anybody on the team remembers how that was done in the old classic system. Oh, account mod. Yeah, I honestly don't remember anymore. Why don't you send us something to redesign help about that? And we can definitely ask the SSTT about that. Okay. Okay. Anything else, anybody? Okay, we went just a little bit over what I planned on, but not too bad. Okay. If there's no questions, if you do think of something, please reach out to our team. And this recording, we will go ahead and get that posted It might be out there tomorrow. It might not be till next week, but this will go to our YouTube channel. So if you're looking for it, that's where it'll be posted. So if there's no other questions, everybody have a great day. Thank you for attending. And I'll go ahead and stop my recording here. Okay, thank you all for coming.